Hi everybody, welcome back to part 3 of Little Women. We are reading, what chapter am I page? Chapter 7, 8, and 9, and this is part 3, so get a drink, get comfy, and we'll get right into chapter number 7. Alright, chapter number 7 is called Amy Learns a Sour Lesson. I hate being in debt, Amy said. In debt? What do you mean? Meg asked. Amy explained that the girls at school were giving out limes at recess. If one girl liked another girl, she gave her a lime. Amy had been given money, but hadn't any limes to share in return. How much money do you need? Asked Meg, taking out her purse. A quarter would more than do it. Meg handed her the money. Oh, thank you. I'll have a grand feast, for I haven't tasted a lime this week. Next day, a rumor went around school that Amy March had 24 delicious limes and was going to treat her friends. Amy became quite the show-off as she displayed her great wealth of limes. Jenny Snow was a young lady who had picked on Amy for not having limes before. Now she wanted to be friends again, but Amy had not forgotten the way Jenny had treated her. She said, "You needn't be so polite all of a sudden. You won't get any limes from me." This made Jenny very angry. She quickly informed Mr. Davis, the teacher, that Amy had limes in her desk. Now, Mr. Davis had announced that no limes were to be in the classroom. He had promised to use his ruler on the first person to break the rules. "Miss March, come here. Bring with you the limes you have in your desk." Amy took out the limes and laid them before Mr. Davis. "Now take these disgusting things and throw them out the window." Amy was red with shame and anger. She went to and fro 6 dreadful times. As she returned from her last trip, Mr. Davis said, "I am sorry this has happened, but I never allow my rules to be broken, Miss March. Hold out your hand." Too proud to cry or beg, Amy threw back her head bravely. She did not flinch as several tingling blows landed on her little palm. They did not hurt, but that made no difference. For the first time in her life she had been struck. The disgrace was as deep as if it had knocked her down. "You will now stand on the platform till recess," said Mr. Davis. With Amy and her limes. What a mean teacher. Good thing they don't hit you anymore. During the 15 minutes that followed, the proud and sensitive little girl suffered a shame and a pain which she never forgot. During the 12 years of her life, she had been governed by love alone. Though both her hand and her heart ached, it was more painful to think of home. She thought, "They will be so disappointed in me." She was in a sad state when she got home. Her family did their best to comfort her, but Amy insisted that she would never return to school. "Well, you can have a vacation, but I want you to study a little every day with Beth," said Miss March. "That's good. It's terrible to think of those lovely limes," said Amy. "I'm not sorry you lost them. You broke the rules and deserve some punishment," said Miss March, "but I do not agree with Mr. Davis's method." "Are you glad I was disgraced before the whole school?" cried Amy. "You are getting to be rather conceited, my dear. It's time you tried to correct it," replied her mother. "You have a good many little gifts, but there is no need of showing them off." There she is. This crap. Standing in front of the class. Amy was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Is Laurie a talented boy?" "Yes, he has had an excellent education, and he has much talent," replied her mother. "And he isn't stuck up, is he?" asked Amy. "No, not in the least. That is why he is so charming, and we all like him so much." "I see. It's nice to have talents and be elegant, but it's not nice to show off," said Amy thoughtfully. "Any more than it's proper to wear all your bonnets and gowns and ribbons at once, just so folks may know you've got them," added Joe, and the lesson ended in a laugh. We'll get into chapter number 8. If you need to take a break, do so now. Alright, chapter 8. Joe finds some weak spots, it's called. "Tell me where you are going," cried Amy one Saturday afternoon. Meg and Joe were getting ready to go out. "You might let me go. I haven't got anything to do." "I can't, dear, because you aren't invited," began Meg. But Joe broke in impatiently. "You can't go, Amy, so don't be a baby and whine about it. You are going somewhere with Lori, aren't you? Are you going to see a play at the theater?" "Yes, we are." "Then stop bothering us," said Joe. "Please let me go," pleaded Amy. "Suppose we take her," began Meg. "If she goes, I won't, and if I don't, Lori won't like it. I would think she'd hate to poke herself anywhere she isn't wanted," said Joe crossly. When Lori called, the two girls hurried down and left her sister crying. As the three set out, Amy called out in a threatening tone, "You'll be sorry for this, Joe Marsh!" One of my favorite parts of the movie. Lori, Joe, and Meg had a charming time, for the play was wonderful, but Joe's pleasure had a drop of bitterness in it. She wondered what her sister would do to make her sorry. When they got home, they found Amy reading in the parlor. Joe searched for evidence of Amy's revenge, but everything was in its place. She decided that Amy had forgiven her. There, Joe was mistaken. The next day, she made a discovery that produced a storm. Meg, Beth, and Amy were sitting together late in the afternoon when Joe burst into the room. "Has anyone taken my writing book?" she demanded. Meg and Beth said no at once and looked surprised. Amy said nothing. Joe was on her in a minute. "Amy, you've got it!" "You'll never see your silly old book again," cried Amy. "I burnt it up." So sisters, ooh, I'm a writer. I would have killed my siblings. "What? My book I was so fond of and meant to finish writing before Father got home? Have you really burned it?" said Joe, turning very pale. "Yes, I did. I told you I'd make you pay yesterday, and I have. So..." Joe's hot temper took over. She took Amy till her teeth chattered in her. She shook Amy until her teeth shattered in her head. "You wicked girl! I never can write it again. I'll never forgive you as long as I live." When Miss March came home, she made Amy realize the wrong she had done her sister. Joe's book was the pride of her heart. It was only half a dozen little fairy tales, but Joe had put her whole heart into her work. She had hoped to make something good enough to print. Amy's bonfire had destroyed the loving work of several years. When the tea bell rang, Joe appeared, looking grim. It took all of Amy's courage to say, "Please forgive me, Joe. I'm very, very sorry." "I never shall forgive you," answered Joe. And from that moment, she ignored Amy entirely. Next day, Joe still looked like a thundercloud. "I'll ask Lori to go skating. He's always kind and jolly," said Joe to herself, and off she went, but Amy heard the clash of skates. But she goes off angrily. "I would be mad too. Years worth of work. Whoo, Lord." "This is the last ice we shall have," pouted Amy. "But it's no use to ask such a grump to take me," Meg said. "Go after them. Once Lori has cheered her up, I'm sure she'll be your friend again." "I'll try," said Amy. It was not far to the river. Joe saw Amy coming and turned her back. Lori did not see, for he was carefully skating along the shore, testing the ice. "I'll go on to see if it's all right before we begin to race," Amy heard him say. Joe heard Amy panting after her, and so she skated slowly down the river away from Amy. Sisters. As Lori turned the bend, he shouted back, "Keep near the shore. It isn't safe in the middle." Joe heard, but Amy had not. Joe glanced over her shoulder. Let her take care of herself, she thought. Amy skated out toward the smoother ice in the middle of the river. For a minute, Joe stood still with a strange feeling in her heart. Then something turned her around, just in time to see Amy go down, with a sudden clash of weak ice and a cry that made Joe's heart freeze. Joe tried to rush forward, but her feet had no strength. Something rushed swiftly by her, and Lori's voice cried out, "Bring her out, quick!" Oh no, she fell through the ice. Oh no, Amy. Laying flat, Lori held Amy up by his arm and a hockey stick until Joe dragged a rail from the fence. Together, they got the child out. More frightened than hurt, shivering, dripping, and crying, they got Amy home. Later, when the house was quiet, Joe went to her mother and said, "If Amy should die, Mother, it would be my fault." She dropped down beside the bed in tears. "It's my dreadful temper. I try to cure it, and then it breaks out worse than ever. Oh, Mother, what shall I do?" cried poor Joe. "Remember this day, and resolve that you will never know another like it," her mother said. "You think your temper is the worst, but mine is to be just like it." "Yours, Mother? Why? You are never angry." "Your father helped me to control my temper, Joe. He showed me that I must try to practice all the virtues I want my little girls to have." "Oh, Mother, if I'm ever half as good as you, I'll be satisfied," cried Joe. "I let the sun go down on my anger yesterday. I wouldn't forgive Amy, and today it might have been too late." She leaned over her sister, softly stroking the wet hair scattered on the pillow. She was taking care of her sister. Amy opened her eyes and hung out her arms. With a smile that went straight to Joe's heart, neither said a word, but they hugged one another close, and everything was forgiven and forgotten in one kiss. That's so sad. We're going to get to chapter number 9 in just a second. Take a break if you need to. Alright, chapter 9 is Meg Has a Beauty Lesson. Meg stood packing her trunk one April day. She had been invited to spend 2 weeks in the country with Annie Moffat and her family. Sally Gardner was going as well. "What did Mother give you out of the treasure box?" asked Amy. The treasure box was a cedar chest in which Miss March kept a few old valuables. They were presented as gifts for her girls when the proper time came. A pair of silk stockings and a pretty carved fan and a lovely blue sash. "I wanted the violet silk dress, but there isn't time to fix it." "You've got your white dress for the big party. You always look like an angel in white," said Amy. "It will have to do," Meg returned. She looked at her well-worn wardrobe and sighed. "I wonder if I shall ever have a real lace on my clothes and bows on my caps." Must have been the trend back then. "You said the other day that you'd be perfectly happy if you could only go to Annie Moffat's," observed Beth in her quiet way. I think I spilled something on the page. "So I did. Well, I'm happy, and I won't fret, but it does seem as if the more one gets, the more one wants, doesn't it?" The next day, Meg departed in style for 2 weeks of pleasure. The Moffats were very fashionable. Simple Meg was rather overwhelmed at first. Everything was so splendid and elegant, but the Moffats were kind people and soon put the guest at her ease. Meg certainly liked having nothing to do but enjoy herself. She began to act and talk just like the rich girls around her. The more she saw of Annie's pretty things, the more she sighed to be rich. Home now looked bare and dismal as she thought of it. It didn't take long for Meg to notice that her own clothing was old and shabby. Annie and her sisters wore only the finest dresses. No one said a word about it, but Meg's heart felt very heavy. She had a gentle heart, but she was also very proud. Poor Meg did not sleep well after a small party one evening. She got up heavy-eyed and unhappy. That afternoon, Annie's older sister, Belle, announced to Meg that she invited young Mr. Lawrence to the next big party. I'll show you the picture before I change into a white dress, or pack in a white dress, I should say. "What shall you wear?" asked Sally Gardner. "My old white dress again," said Meg. She tried to speak quite easily, but felt very uncomfortable. Belle said kindly, "I've got a sweet blue silk packed away, which I've outgrown. Wear it to please me, won't you?" "You are very kind, but I don't mind my old dress if you don't," said Meg. "Now, do let me please myself by dressing you up in style. You'll be a regular little beauty with a touch here and there, said Belle. Meg agreed. She very much wanted to see if she would be a little beauty. After some touching up, the excitement caused her to forget all her uncomfortable feelings towards the Moffats. Belle and her maid turned Meg into a fine lady. They crimped and curled her hair and reddened her lips. They laced her into a sky-blue dress, which was so tight she could hardly breathe. Silver jewelry was added, and a pair of high-heeled silk boots granted the last wish of her heart. A lace handkerchief, a fan, a bouquet finished her off. Belle proudly looked over her newly dressed doll. Look at her. Looks very pretty and sophisticated. Meg got safely downstairs and into the drawing room where the guests had gathered. She very soon discovered that there is a charm about fine clothes. People who had ignored her before were suddenly very polite to her. Young boys asked to meet her. But soon the tight dress gave her a side ache. Her skirt kept getting under her feet, and she was afraid she was going to lose a beak. What's wrong with me? And she was afraid she was going to lose or break one of the silver earrings. Then she suddenly saw Laurie. He was staring at her with surprise and disapproval. Something in his honest eyes made her wish she had her old dress on. Meg crossed the room to shake hands with her friend. I was afraid you wouldn't come, she asked. Jo wanted me to come and tell her how you looked, asked Laurie. What shall you tell her? Asked Meg, full of curiosity to know his opinion of her. I shall say, I didn't know you, for you look so grown-up and unlike yourself. I'm quite afraid of you, he said. I don't like the fuss and feathers. That was altogether too much from a lad younger than herself. Meg walked away saying, You are the rudest boy I ever saw. Uh-oh. She was very offended by that. She was telling the truth. She went and stood at a quiet window to cool her cheeks. As she stood there, some of the party guests walked by, but did not see her standing there. Meg heard one of them say, They are making such a fool of that Marsh girl. She's made her up to look like a doll tonight. Oh dear, sighed Meg. I wish I'd been sensible and worn my own things. Turning, she saw Laurie. He said, Please forgive my rudeness. Come and dance with me. I don't like your gown, but I do think you are just splendid. Meg smiled. She whispered, Take care of my skirt, so it doesn't trip you up. I was a goose to wear it. After the dance, Laurie did not speak to Meg again till supper time, when he saw her drinking champagne and flirting with Annie's brothers. You'll have a splitting headache tomorrow if you drink that much, he whispered, leaning over her chair. I'm not Meg tonight. I'm a doll who does all sorts of crazy things. Tomorrow I shall be good again, she answered. Wish tomorrow was here then, muttered Laurie, unhappy with the change in Meg. Just trying to fit in, I think. Meg was sick all the next day. On Saturday she went home feeling like she had sat in a lap of luxury long enough. On Sunday evening she sat with her mother and Jo, saying very little. Then as the clock struck 9, Meg went to her mother's side, saying bravely, Mommy, I want to confess. I thought so. What is it, dear? She told them how the Moffat girls had dressed her up like a doll. Now she had been flattered by the attention. She also confessed to drinking champagne and trying to flirt. Jo saw her mother fold her lips tightly. Miss March said gravely, I was very unwise to let you go. I won't let it hurt me, Mother. Learn to know and value the praise which is worth having, Meg. Meg sighed. Poor girls don't stand any chance, Belle says. Then we'll be old maids, said Jo. Miss March held her daughter's hands. My dear girls, you do not have to marry rich men merely because they are rich. I'd rather you poor men's wives if you were happy than queens on thrones without self-respect and peace. What a good mom. This is a blessing. One thing to remember, my girls, mothers Mother is always ready to be your listening ear and Father to be your friend. And both of us hope that our daughters will be the pride and comfort of our lives. We will, Mommy, we will, both cried with all their hearts. It's getting good. That's the end of part 3. Part 4 I'm going to do next, and then you have to wait for 6 more chapters. But in the next video, we're doing chapter 10, 11, and 12. So stay tuned for that. I will see you all next time. Be good out there. Bye. Maybe.